Brooks wrapped his fingers around the Admiral's throat, not to check his pulse, to feel him die. The old man was unconscious, tubes in his arms, monitors beeping, completely helpless. Brooks squeezed. "You were supposed to die in that hallway," he whispered. "That nurse ruined everything." He released the throat and pulled a syringe from his jacket. One injection into the IV line, cardiac arrest within 90 seconds, and every doctor in this hospital would call it complications from this morning. No one would investigate, no one would question it, because the only person who knew the truth, the nurse who had punched a 4-star admiral in the chest to restart his heart, was locked in a cell 6 floors below, charged with the very murder Brooks was about to finish. But Brooks did not know something. Rachel Morgan was not staying in that cell. If this story grabs you, subscribe right now, follow it to the very end, and comment what city you are watching from. Let us see how far this story travels. Rachel Morgan had not slept in 31 hours, and she did not care. Sleep was a luxury ICU nurses traded away the moment they pinned on their badges. 14 years she had worked cardiac units, 14 years of flat lines and screaming families, and the smell of adrenaline at 3 in the morning. She had watched 19-year-old Marines die while their mothers clawed at hallway doors trying to reach them. She had held a colonel's hand while his lungs filled with fluid, and his eyes begged her to do something she could not do. None of that prepared her for Tuesday. 9:37 a.m., Rachel walked onto the cardiac wing at St. Jude Medical Center, Bethesda, and the first thing she saw was Admiral James Caldwell standing in the hallway holding a cup of coffee. That was wrong. He was a 71-year-old 4-star admiral admitted 2 days ago for cardiac monitoring. His chart said bed rest. His chart said decaf only. His chart said no unsupervised movement outside his room. Rachel walked straight to him. "Admiral Caldwell, you need to be in your room." He turned with the kind of half grin men like him always had. The grin that said, "I have survived things you cannot imagine, and you want me to worry about a cup of coffee." "Nurse, I have spent 48 years following orders. I think I have earned 5 minutes in a hallway." "Your chart says decaf. That is regular. I can smell it." "You have a good nose." "I have a good memory. Last month, a cardiac patient on this floor grabbed a cup of regular from the break room. He coded in the elevator. We lost him for 4 minutes. His wife was standing right next to him when his heart stopped." Rachel took the cup from his hand. "So, with respect, Admiral, no." Caldwell stared at her. Then he laughed, deep and real. "What is your name?" "Rachel Morgan. I am your primary nurse today, and I am walking you back to your room right now." "Fair enough. You win." They started walking, and that should have been the end of it. A stubborn patient, a firm nurse, a story nobody would ever tell. But Rachel saw his left hand. It was trembling. Not the gentle shake of a 71-year-old man. This was rhythmic, mechanical, the kind of tremor that starts in the fingers and crawls up the forearm like something alive. "Admiral, how do you feel right now?" "Fine." He was not fine. His voice had thinned. His jaw was tightening in a way that had nothing to do with stubbornness. "When did you eat breakfast?" "About 40 minutes ago. Why?" "What did they bring you?" "Oatmeal, fruit, orange juice. What does my breakfast have to do with anything?" Rachel stopped walking. She grabbed his wrist. The tremor was worse. His forearm muscles were contracting involuntarily, twitching under the skin. "Can you taste anything right now? Anything unusual?" Caldwell swallowed, and something changed in his eyes. Something old and primal. The look of a man who had faced death before and recognized it walking toward him again. "Metal," he said. "I taste metal." Rachel's stomach dropped. 14 years of emergency nursing. She had seen metallic taste combined with involuntary muscle rigidity exactly twice. Both times the cause was chemical. Both times someone had put something in the patient's body that was not supposed to be there. "Stop walking, right now." "What is happening to me?" Your muscles are locking up. I can see it in your jaw, your hand, your forearm. Something is causing systemic rigidity, and it is getting worse fast. That is impossible. I am in a hospital. I am perfectly... His right knee buckled. Rachel caught him. 130 pounds holding up 215. She braced her back against the wall and wrapped her arms around his chest. "I need help," she screamed down the hallway. "Code team to cardiac wing, now!" Nobody answered. The hallway was empty. Rachel looked left. Empty. She looked right. Empty. The nurse's station was unmanned. The junior staffer who had been there 2 minutes ago was gone. The security officer posted outside the Admiral's room was gone. The crash cart that hospital policy required to be stationed within 15 feet of every high-priority patient was gone. Everything was gone. That was when Rachel understood this was not a medical emergency. This was something else entirely. The Admiral's body went rigid in her arms. Every muscle locked simultaneously. His eyes flew open. His mouth gaped, but nothing came out. His chest froze mid-breath, like someone had poured concrete into his lungs. Rachel lowered him to the floor, pressed 2 fingers to his carotid artery. Nothing. No pulse. No heartbeat. Nothing. "No," she said. "No, no, no." She started compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. She pushed hard. She pushed fast. She tilted his head back. 2 breaths. Checked again. Nothing. 30 seconds gone. His skin was graying. His lips were turning blue. 60 seconds. She screamed for help again. Her voice echoed off empty walls. 90 seconds. She was losing him. Every minute without circulation meant brain cells dying by the millions. She had no defibrillator, no epinephrine, no amiodarone, no team, nothing but her 2 hands and a man whose heart had decided to quit. And then she remembered, years ago, her first deployment with the Navy, a training ship in the middle of the Pacific. A young corpsman had gone into sudden cardiac arrest during a drill. No AED on deck, no medical kit within reach. An old combat medic, a guy named Vasquez who had served in 3 wars and had hands like catcher's mitts, he stepped forward and punched the corpsman in the chest. Everyone froze, and then the kid's heart started beating. A precordial thump. A direct, forceful blow to the sternum, designed to generate enough mechanical energy to interrupt the electrical malfunction and kick the heart back into rhythm. It was old. It was dangerous. It was almost never taught anymore. Modern protocol said, wait for the defibrillator, wait for the drugs, wait for the team. But there was no team. There was no defibrillator. There was no time. There was only Rachel Morgan and a dying man on a cold floor. She looked at his face, gray, slack, already halfway gone. She thought about his daughter. She had read the intake file. Olivia Caldwell, 38, civil rights attorney, only living family. Somewhere in Washington right now, probably sitting in her office, no idea her father's heart had just stopped. Rachel thought about protocol. She thought about her nursing license. She thought about what the review board would say. Then she stopped thinking. She made a fist. She raised it over his sternum, and she brought it down with everything she had. The impact was brutal. She felt bone flex under her knuckles. She felt the shock travel up her arm. The Admiral's body jerked. His back arched off the tile. And then, one beat. Weak, irregular, but there. Rachel pressed her hand flat against his chest. 2 beats. 3, 4. Unsteady and fragile, like a motor trying to turn over in the cold. "Come on," she hissed through her teeth. "Come on, stay with me." 5 beats. 6. Stronger now. Still ragged, but holding. The Admiral's eyelids fluttered. His lips moved. No sound came out, but his chest was rising and falling, shallow and uneven, but rising and falling. He was alive. Rachel exhaled. Her whole body was shaking. Her knuckles were already swelling. Her arms burned from the compressions. But he was alive. That was when she heard the boots. 6 federal security agents rounded the corner at full sprint, weapons drawn, shouting commands that overlapped into a wall of noise. "Step away from the Admiral. Hands where I can see them. Get on the ground, now." Rachel raised her blood-smeared hands. "He went into cardiac arrest. I performed emergency on the ground, now." "Listen to me." His heart stopped. "I had no equipment. I performed a precordial." 2 agents slammed her against the wall. Her forehead cracked against the plaster. White light exploded behind her eyes. She tasted blood. They wrenched her arms behind her back and cuffed her wrists so tight the metal bit into her skin. "He was poisoned," Rachel shouted as they dragged her away from his body. "Something in his breakfast. You need to pull his blood right now and run a toxicology panel before whatever they used metabolizes. Do you hear me? You have hours, not days. If you wait, the evidence is gone." Nobody listened. The lead agent spoke into his radio as they hauled Rachel down the corridor. His voice was calm, professional, practiced. "Package is secure. Nurse has been contained. Proceeding as planned." Rachel stopped struggling. Proceeding as planned. She had been in the military. She knew operational language. Proceeding as planned was not what you said when responding to an unexpected emergency. Proceeding as planned was what you said when the emergency was the plan. Someone had known the Admiral was going to collapse. Someone had cleared the hallway, removed the staff, pulled the crash cart, replaced his breakfast tray, and positioned security to arrive not in time to save him, but in time to find him dead and arrest whoever was closest. Rachel was not the attacker. She was the fall guy. They put her in a windowless room in the basement. 1 metal chair, 1 metal table, a camera in the corner with a red light that blinked every 3 seconds. The cuffs stayed on. Nobody brought water. Nobody told her if the Admiral was alive or dead. 3 hours passed. At 1:14 p.m., the door opened, and a man walked in who made Rachel's skin crawl before he even sat down. Mid-40s, clean-shaven, dark suit, an NCIS badge on his belt, and a thin manila folder in his hand. He moved like a man who had rehearsed this conversation. "Special Agent Daniel Brooks," he said, "Naval Criminal Investigative Service. I have been assigned to your case. Is the Admiral alive?" Brooks ignored the question. He opened the folder. Rachel Ann Morgan, 41, 14 years as a registered nurse, prior military service, Navy Hospital Corps. He paused, let the silence build. "Discharged under other than honorable conditions following an insubordination incident during your 2nd deployment. That has nothing to do with what happened today. It has everything to do with what happened today. It establishes a pattern. Defiance of authority, inability to follow orders, documented aggression." He closed the folder and leaned forward. "In this morning, you punched a 4-star Admiral in the chest hard enough to fracture his sternum. His heart had stopped. There was no crash cart. There was no team. I performed an emergency precordial thump to restart cardiac activity, and it worked." "Or," Brooks said, his voice dropping, "you assaulted a 71-year-old man who was recovering from a cardiac episode, caused additional cardiac trauma, and fractured his sternum in the process. Pull his blood work." "Excuse me?" "Pull his blood work. Run a full toxicology screen. Test for fast metabolizing paralytic agents, organophosphates, succinylcholine derivatives, anything that causes rapid onset muscle rigidity with metallic taste as a presenting symptom. He told me he tasted metal 30 seconds before he collapsed. That is not a symptom of being punched, Agent Brooks. That is a symptom of being poisoned." Brooks did not blink, did not flinch, did not write anything down. "Toxicology is being handled through appropriate channels," he said. "What channels?" Channels that do not involve you. Rachel stared at him. You are not going to test it, are you? I did not say that. You did not have to. You walked in here with a closed folder and a closed mind. You already have your narrative. Unstable nurse with a bad military record snaps and assaults a patient. Clean, simple, done. But the problem with your narrative, Agent Brooks, is that it requires you to explain why the hallway was empty, why the crash cart was missing, why his security detail was absent, and why his breakfast tray contained food that nobody on my shift ordered. Something moved behind Brooks's eyes, fast, like a shadow crossing a window. Those are operational concerns that do not fall under your purview. They fall under my purview because I am the one you are charging with a crime I did not commit. Brooks stood up, buttoned his jacket, straightened his cuffs. You are being transferred to military custody pending formal charges. Current recommendation is aggravated assault on a senior military official. If Admiral Caldwell does not recover, those charges will be upgraded to attempted murder. You know I saved his life. Brooks walked to the door, put his hand on the handle, paused. What I know, he said without turning around, is not relevant. The door closed, the lock engaged. Rachel sat in the silence with her swollen knuckles and her aching head and the metallic echo of those words. What I know is not relevant. That was not the statement of a man investigating a crime. That was the statement of a man managing one. 700 miles south, Olivia Caldwell was sitting in her office at the Equal Justice Initiative when her phone rang. Ms. Caldwell, this is Commander Peters at Bethesda Naval Medical Center. Your father was involved in a medical incident this morning. He is in critical but stable condition. What happened? He experienced a cardiac event. A nurse intervened physically. He sustained some injuries. What do you mean a nurse intervened physically? What does that mean? I am not authorized to provide further details at this time. We recommend you come to the facility for a briefing. Olivia hung up. Her hands were steady. Her mind was not. She opened her laptop, searched her father's name. The story was everywhere, every network, every outlet, every feed. Navy nurse attacks 4-star Admiral in hospital hallway. ICU, nurse arrested after punching war hero. Violent assault on Pentagon legend caught on camera. The footage was grainy, security camera wide angle. It showed a woman in scrubs standing over a man on the floor. It showed her fist connecting with his chest. It showed his body convulsing. Olivia watched it 3 times. Not the way the public was watching it, with outrage and horror. She watched it the way a lawyer watches evidence, looking for what was missing. The hallway was empty. No staff, no equipment, no security. A 4-star Admiral with a cardiac condition was standing alone in a corridor with no medical support within sight. Why? Olivia watched it a 4th time. She focused on the nurse. The woman was not attacking. Her body language was wrong for aggression. There was no wind-up, no rage, no follow-through. It was a single, targeted, desperate blow delivered by a woman who was clearly terrified. That was not violence. That was emergency medicine. Olivia grabbed her coat and her car keys. She was not waiting for a briefing. She was not waiting for anyone to tell her what happened. She had spent 12 years fighting cases where the official story was a lie. She knew what cover-ups smelled like. And this one reeked. 3 floors above Rachel's holding cell, in a restricted lab on the 7th floor of St. Jude Medical Center, a technician named David Cho stared at his computer screen and felt his hands go cold. The toxicology results from Admiral Caldwell's blood had just come back, and they were wrong. Not wrong as in inconclusive, wrong as in impossible to explain by natural causes. Suppressed plasma cholinesterase activity, trace markers consistent with a synthetic paralytic compound. Rapid metabolization profiles suggesting the agent was designed to break down within hours and leave no trace. Someone had poisoned the Admiral. Cho reached for his phone to call the attending physician. Before he could dial, his office door opened. A man in a dark suit stepped in. NCIS badge. Cold eyes. "Agent Brooks," the man said, "I need those results. I was just about to report them to Dr. Moreno. The Admiral's blood shows." "I know what it shows. I need the raw data, the samples, and your preliminary report transferred to my custody immediately. This is now a matter of national security. Agent Brooks, standard protocol requires me to..." "Standard protocol has been superseded by a federal security directive. Hand over the samples, all of them." Cho hesitated. "There are chain of custody requirements. If I release these without..." "Mr. Cho," Brooks stepped closer. His voice did not rise. It did not need to. "The Admiral is a senior military asset. His medical data is now classified. You will transfer all materials to me within the hour, and you will not discuss these results with anyone. Not Dr. Moreno, not the nursing staff, not your wife at dinner tonight. No one. Am I clear?" Cho looked at the screen, at the numbers that proved someone had tried to murder a 4-star admiral inside a United States military hospital. Then he looked at the man standing in front of him, the man who was supposed to be investigating that murder, the man who was clearly here to bury it. "Am I clear, Mr. Cho?" Cho nodded. "Yes, sir." Brooks collected the samples personally, every vial, every printout, every backup file. He walked out of the lab carrying the only physical evidence that could prove Rachel Morgan was telling the truth, and Admiral Caldwell had been the target of an assassination attempt. By midnight, those samples would be destroyed. By morning, the official story would be sealed. A violent nurse with a bad record attacked a national hero in a hospital hallway. Open and shut. No conspiracy, no poison, no questions. And Rachel Morgan, the woman who had saved the Admiral's life with her bare hands, would face a judge, a jury, and a sentence that would bury her as deep as the truth. Unless someone found the evidence before it vanished. Unless someone asked the right questions before the answers were erased. Unless someone was willing to fight as hard as Rachel had fought in that hallway, not with fists this time, but with something even more dangerous. The truth. The clock in Rachel's holding cell read 6:47 p.m. Somewhere above her, Olivia Caldwell was pulling into the Bethesda parking garage. Somewhere above that, David Cho was watching Agent Brooks walk away with every sample that proved what really happened. And somewhere in a restricted hospital room, Admiral James Caldwell lay in an induced coma with a fractured sternum and a heartbeat he owed to a woman the whole country now wanted to see behind bars. The clock kept ticking. The evidence kept disappearing, and the only person who could connect all of it was sitting in a locked room with nothing but her memory, her bruised knuckles, and the absolute certainty that she had done the right thing. The question was whether anyone would believe her before it was too late. The clock in Rachel's holding cell read 7:22 p.m. when the door opened again. She expected Brooks. She expected more threats, more pressure, more of that cold, calculated voice telling her to accept what was coming. Instead, a military police officer stepped in, unlocked her cuffs, and said 3 words, "You have counsel." Rachel rubbed her wrists. The skin was raw. "I did not request counsel. Someone requested it for you." They walked her down a corridor she had never seen before, through 2 security checkpoints, and into a small conference room with a metal table and 2 chairs. Sitting in one of those chairs was a woman Rachel had never met but recognized immediately. Olivia Caldwell looked exactly like her father. Same sharp jaw, same dark eyes that seemed to measure everything they touched, same posture that said, "I did not come here to ask questions I already know the answers to." "Sit down," Olivia said. Rachel sat. "My name is Olivia Caldwell. Admiral Caldwell is my father. I am a civil rights attorney with the Equal Justice Initiative, and as of 45 minutes ago, I am your legal representative." "I did not ask for a lawyer." "You did not have to. I watched the footage. I spoke with the attending physician. I reviewed your personnel file, your nursing record, and your military service history. And then I spent 20 minutes arguing with 3 different people to get into this room. Olivia folded her hands on the table. So let me be clear about something, Rachel. I am not here because I feel sorry for you. I am here because I believe someone tried to kill my father, and you are the only person in this building who tried to stop it. Rachel stared at her. For the first time in 10 hours, something cracked inside her chest. Not pain, something worse. Hope. He told me he tasted metal, Rachel said, right before he collapsed. Metallic taste combined with involuntary muscle rigidity and rapid cardiac arrest. That is not a natural presentation. That is chemical. I know. Someone cleared the hallway. The crash cart was removed. His security detail was pulled. His breakfast tray was swapped. None of that was accidental. I know that too. Then you know what I need. The toxicology results from his blood draw this morning. If they tested it within the first few hours, the compound would still be detectable. That blood work is the only thing that proves what really happened in that hallway. Olivia's expression did not change, but her voice dropped. I already tried to access the toxicology report. It has been classified. An NCIS agent named Brooks took custody of all samples and raw data from the hospital lab at approximately 4:30 this afternoon. Rachel felt like the floor had dropped out beneath her. He took the samples. All of them. Then they are gone. He is going to destroy them, if he has not already. That is what I believe, yes. Rachel pressed her palms flat against the table. Her swollen knuckles throbbed. Then there is no evidence. His word against mine. And his word comes with a badge and a federal agency behind it. Olivia reached into her briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper. She slid it across the table. Not exactly. Rachel picked it up. It was an internal lab log, a printout showing sample intake, timestamps, and processing codes for Admiral Caldwell's blood work. Where did you get this? The lab technician, David Cho, he printed a copy of the preliminary results before Brooks confiscated everything. He did not give it to me directly. He left it on a counter where I happened to be standing. Plausible deniability. Rachel read the numbers. Suppressed plasma cholinesterase. Trace synthetic markers. Metabolization rate consistent with a designed paralytic agent. This proves it, Rachel whispered. It suggests it. A printout without chain of custody will not hold up in federal court, but it does something else. It gives us a direction. If we can identify the compound, we can trace where it came from. If we can trace where it came from, we can find out who ordered it. And if we can find out who ordered it, we can prove this was not a random medical event. It was an assassination attempt. Rachel looked up from the paper. Why are you doing this? Because someone tried to murder my father. No. Why are you helping me? Your father is lying in a coma because of what happened in that hallway. Half the country thinks I put him there. You could let me take the fall and focus on finding who poisoned him. It would be easier. Olivia leaned forward. My father called me 4 days ago, Sunday night. He told me he had been working on something inside the Pentagon for months. A review of a naval weapons contract worth $11.3 billion. He said he had found evidence that the contract was fraudulent. Inflated costs, shell companies, kickbacks to senior defense officials. He said he was preparing a classified briefing to present the evidence to the Secretary of Defense. When was the briefing? Wednesday, tomorrow. Rachel closed her eyes. They poisoned him the day before the briefing. Yes, and when the poison did not kill him fast enough, they needed a fall guy. Someone to take the blame so no one would ask why a 4-star admiral collapsed in a hospital hallway 24 hours before he was supposed to expose a multi-billion-dollar fraud. You were convenient, Rachel. Wrong place, wrong time, right background. A nurse with an other-than-honorable discharge and a documented history of insubordination. You were perfect. Brooks is not just investigating this. He is part of it. That is what I believe. Then your father is still in danger. If the briefing was supposed to happen tomorrow, and he is the only one with the evidence, they are not going to stop. They cannot afford to let him wake up. Olivia's jaw tightened. I know. Who is with him right now? Military security, 2 agents outside his room. Whose agents? Brooks's? The silence that followed was the loudest sound Rachel had ever heard. Olivia stood up. I need to make some calls. I am going to contact a federal judge I trust to request an emergency injunction protecting my father's medical records and an independent toxicology review. I am also reaching out to a journalist at the Washington Post who covers defense corruption. If Brooks tries to bury this, we need an insurance policy. And me? You stay here for now. I am filing a habeas petition tonight. I should have you in front of a judge by morning. I cannot wait until morning. Rachel, your father is unconscious in a room guarded by people who may work for the man who tried to kill him. David Cho's printout proves the poison was real, but the physical evidence is in Brooks's hands, and he will destroy it tonight. By morning, there will be nothing left. No samples, no data, no proof. And your father will be alone with people who want him dead. Olivia stared at her. What are you suggesting? I am not suggesting anything. I am telling you that if someone does not get to your father's room tonight, he will not survive until your injunction goes through. You are in military custody. I am aware of that. If you leave this facility, they will add escape charges. They will add obstruction. They will use it to prove you are exactly what Brooks says you are. And if I stay here, your father dies. Which outcome do you prefer? 8:41 p.m. Olivia left the conference room and walked directly to the nurse's station on the ground floor. She asked to see the attending physician, Dr. Moreno. She was told he had left for the day. She asked to see the duty nurse. She was told the duty nurse was unavailable. She asked who was currently monitoring Admiral Caldwell's care. Nobody could give her a straight answer. Olivia took the elevator to the 4th floor. She walked to her father's room. 2 security agents stood outside the door. She did not recognize either of them. I am Olivia Caldwell. I would like to see my father. Visiting hours ended at 8. I am his next of kin and his legal representative. Ma'am, the Admiral is in a restricted medical unit. Access requires authorization from the supervising agent. And who is the supervising agent? Special Agent Daniel Brooks. Olivia felt the walls close in. I am requesting immediate access to my father's medical records, his current treatment plan, and the name of every person who has entered his room in the past 12 hours. The agent did not move. You will need to take that up with Agent Brooks. Where is Agent Brooks right now? I am not authorized to disclose that information. Olivia turned and walked back to the elevator. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, from the kind of controlled fury that had made her one of the most effective attorneys in Washington. She pulled out her phone and called the one person she knew could move faster than the system. David, she said when he picked up, it is Olivia Caldwell. I need you to do something, and I need you to do it right now. David Cho was sitting in his car in the hospital parking garage. He had not gone home. He had been sitting there for 3 hours, staring at his steering wheel, trying to decide what kind of man he was. What do you need? He said. When you processed the Admiral's blood this morning, how many samples did you draw? 4 vials. Standard protocol for the panel Dr. Moreno ordered. Brooks took all 4? He took the 3 I logged. He watched me hand them over. Olivia's breath caught. You said 4 vials. He took 3. What happened to the 4th? Cho was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I made a mistake. I accidentally mislabeled 1 vial and placed it in the general population sample fridge on the 3rd floor, instead of the restricted toxicology unit. It was an honest clerical error. Olivia closed her eyes. David. An honest clerical error, Ms. Caldwell. I am sure it will turn up eventually. 3rd floor, general sample refrigerator, Bay 7, slot 19. Thank you. Do not thank me. I was never on this call. I am going home to watch television, and I do not know anything about anything. The line went dead. Olivia stood in the elevator lobby and stared at the floor indicator. Third floor, general sample refrigerator, Bay 7, slot 19. One vial of blood that proved Admiral James Caldwell had been poisoned. One vial that proved Rachel Morgan was innocent. One vial that Agent Daniel Brooks did not know existed. But Olivia could not get to the third floor lab. She was a civilian attorney. She had no hospital credentials, no access badge, no authorization. The moment she tried to enter a restricted medical area without clearance, security would flag it and Brooks would know within minutes. She needed someone who had credentials, someone who had a reason to be on that floor, someone who knew the layout of this hospital the way most people knew their own homes. She needed Rachel Morgan. 9:17 p.m. Olivia walked back into the conference room where Rachel was being held. The military police officer outside the door checked her credentials and let her in. Rachel looked up. What happened? There is a fourth vial. Cho saved one. Third floor sample refrigerator, Bay 7, slot 19. But I cannot access it. I need you. I am in custody. I know. There is an MP outside that door. I know. So how exactly do you propose I get to the third floor? Olivia reached into her briefcase and pulled out a folded set of hospital scrubs. She placed them on the table. Rachel stared at them. Where did you get those? Supply closet on the second floor. I am an attorney. I am resourceful. If I walk out of this room, I am a fugitive. If you stay in this room, my father is a dead man. Rachel picked up the scrubs. They were her size. She looked at Olivia and saw something in the younger woman's eyes that she recognized. Not recklessness, not desperation, conviction. The unshakable certainty that comes from knowing the system has failed, and the only option left is to go around it. The MP checks in every 15 minutes, Rachel said. He looked through the window 3 minutes ago. That gives us 12 minutes. The conference room shares a wall with the supply corridor. There is a maintenance access panel behind the filing cabinet in the corner. It leads to a service hallway that connects to the south stairwell. Olivia blinked. How do you know that? I have worked in this hospital for 6 years. I know every corridor, every shortcut, every blind spot in the camera system. I used to take the service hallway to avoid the cafeteria during lunch rush. Rachel pulled the scrubs over her clothes. 12 minutes. That is enough time to reach the third floor, pull the vial, and get back before anyone knows I moved. And if you get caught, then you better have that habeas petition ready. 9:23 p.m. Rachel pushed the filing cabinet away from the wall. The maintenance panel was right where she remembered it. She pulled it open, squeezed through, and entered the service hallway. It was narrow and poorly lit, the kind of corridor that existed in every hospital, but that patients never saw. Pipe runs along the ceiling, electrical conduit on the walls, the hum of machinery from somewhere deep below. Rachel moved fast, not running. Running attracted attention. She walked with purpose, the way nurses walk when there is a code and every second matters. Head up, shoulders square, scrubs clean, badge missing, but at this hour, half the staff had their badges in their pockets anyway. She took the south stairwell to the third floor, pushed through the door. The corridor was quiet. Night shift had skeleton staffing, and most of the activity was concentrated on the ICU floors above. The general sample refrigerator was in the auxiliary lab at the end of the hall. Rachel had been in this room 100 times for routine blood work. She knew the layout by touch. Bay 7, slot 19. She opened the refrigerator. The cold air hit her face. Rows of labeled vials, each one tagged with a patient number, a timestamp, and a processing code. Slot 19 was empty. Rachel's heart stopped. She checked again. Bay 7, slot 19. Empty. No vial, no label, nothing. Someone had already been here. Rachel pulled out her mental timeline. Cho said he mislabeled the vial and placed it here. That was this morning. Olivia called Cho less than 40 minutes ago. Between this morning and now, someone had found the fourth vial and removed it. Brooks. He must have gone back to the lab, reviewed the intake logs, noticed the discrepancy. 4 vials drawn, 3 collected. He would have searched every refrigerator on every floor until he found it. Rachel slammed the refrigerator door. The sound echoed through the empty lab. It was over. The last piece of physical evidence was gone. No vial, no proof, no way to verify that the Admiral had been poisoned. The only things left were Cho's printout and Rachel's testimony, and neither would survive a federal courtroom without hard evidence to back them up. She leaned against the counter and pressed her forehead against the cold surface. 14 years of nursing. 14 years of saving lives and following rules and believing that the system worked. And here she was, standing in a dark lab at 9:30 at night, a fugitive from military custody with nothing. Then she saw it. Taped to the inside of the refrigerator door, partially hidden behind a maintenance schedule, was a yellow sticky note, handwritten. 2 words, Check 19. Rachel peeled it off. Cho's handwriting. She had seen it on lab reports for years. Precise, compact, unmistakable. Check 19. But slot 19 was empty, unless he did not mean the slot. Rachel opened the refrigerator again. She reached past the front row of vials, past the second row, all the way to the back of Bay 7. Her fingers touched something wedged behind the rear panel. A single vial, hidden behind the metal frame of the shelf itself, invisible unless you reach past everything in front of it. Cho had not put the vial in slot 19. He had put it behind slot 19. Hidden in plain sight in a place no one would find unless they knew exactly where to look. Rachel pulled it out. The label read, J. Caldwell, 0942, Tox Panel 4. The blood inside was dark and still. The timestamp matched the morning draw. This was it, the last surviving sample, the only physical proof that Admiral Caldwell had been poisoned. Rachel held it in her hand and felt the weight of everything it represented. This small glass tube was worth more than any weapon, any badge, any federal investigation. It was the truth. And right now the truth fit in the palm of her hand. She slipped the vial into her scrub pocket and moved. 9:39 p.m. Rachel was back in the service hallway, heading toward the south stairwell, when she heard footsteps above her. Heavy, deliberate, coming down. She pressed herself against the wall. The footsteps stopped 1 flight up. A door opened and closed. Then silence. Rachel waited 30 seconds. Then she moved again, fast, down the hallway, back toward the maintenance panel in the conference room where Olivia was waiting. She made it to the panel, squeezed through, pushed the filing cabinet back into place. Olivia was standing by the table, her face tight with tension. Did you get it? Rachel pulled the vial from her pocket and held it up. Olivia exhaled like she had been holding her breath for an hour. Oh, thank God. We need to get this to an independent lab. Tonight, not a military facility, not a government-affiliated hospital. An independent toxicology lab with no connection to the Department of Defense. I know a forensic pathologist at Georgetown University Medical Center, Dr. Sarah Chen. She testified in 3 of my cases. She is independent, credible, and she owes me a favor. Call her. Now. Olivia picked up her phone. Then she stopped. Rachel, there is something else. What? While you were gone, I tried to see my father again. The agents outside his door would not let me in, but I could see through the window. Olivia's voice cracked for the first time. There was someone in his room, not medical staff, not security. A man in a dark suit standing over his bed, just standing there, looking at him. Brooks? I could not see his face, but whoever it was, he was alone with my father. No nurse, no doctor, just him. Rachel felt the blood drain from her face. How long ago? 20 minutes. And you left? They forced me to leave. They said I was creating a disturbance. Rachel grabbed Olivia's arm. We need to get to your father's room, right now. Not in an hour, not after we call the lab. Right now. Rachel, if they see you outside this room, if we do not get up there in the next 5 minutes, there may not be a patient left to save. 9:44 p.m. They moved together through the service corridor. Rachel led. Olivia followed. No words, no hesitation. Two women with everything to lose walking straight toward the most dangerous room in the building. Rachel knew the route. Service hallway to south stairwell. South stairwell to fourth floor. Fourth floor corridor to the cardiac ICU. The Admiral's room was at the end of the hall, behind two security checkpoints and two armed agents who answered to the man who wanted him dead. They reached the fourth floor. Rachel peered through the stairwell door. The corridor was empty. Not quiet, empty. The two agents who had been posted outside the Admiral's door were gone. The nurse's station was unmanned. The monitors at the central desk were still running, but no one was watching them. Exactly like that morning. It is happening again, Rachel whispered. They cleared the floor. Olivia's face went white. Go! Rachel pushed through the door and ran. She did not care about cameras. She did not care about custody. She did not care about charges. She sprinted down the corridor, past the empty station, past the abandoned security post, straight to Admiral Caldwell's door. She grabbed the handle. Locked. She slammed her shoulder against it. The door did not move. Admiral, she shouted. Admiral Caldwell. No response from inside, but she could hear the monitors, and the rhythm was wrong. Too fast, erratic, climbing toward a pattern she had heard 1,000 times before. Ventricular tachycardia. His heart was failing. Rachel backed up 2 steps and kicked the door just below the handle. The lock held. She kicked again, metal bent. She kicked a 3rd time with everything she had, and the latch gave way. The door flew open. Agent Daniel Brooks stood beside the Admiral's bed with a syringe in his right hand and the IV port in his left. He turned toward Rachel with an expression of pure, cold fury. You should not be here, he said. Rachel did not stop moving. Rachel charged straight at Brooks. No hesitation, no calculation, pure instinct born from 14 years of watching people die and refusing to let it happen one more time. Brooks was bigger, stronger, trained, but he was not expecting a 130-pound woman to launch herself at him like a missile. Rachel slammed into his torso with her shoulder, driving him backward away from the IV line. The syringe flew from his hand and skittered across the floor. Brooks hit the wall hard. His head snapped back. For 1 second, maybe 2, he was stunned. Rachel spun toward the Admiral's bed. The monitors were screaming. Heart rate 168 and climbing. Ventricular tachycardia spiraling toward fibrillation. She grabbed the IV line and ripped it out of the port. Whatever Brooks had already pushed into that line, she needed to stop the flow immediately. What did you give him? She shouted over her shoulder. What was in that syringe? Brooks straightened up against the wall. He touched the back of his head. His fingers came away clean. No blood. His eyes locked onto Rachel with a kind of dead calm that frightened her more than rage ever could. You just made the biggest mistake of your life, he said. What was in the syringe, Brooks? You are an escaped prisoner who just assaulted a federal agent. Do you understand what that means? I could shoot you right now and call it justified. Then shoot me, but first, tell me what you injected into his IV, because his heart rate is 172 and climbing, and if I do not counteract whatever you pushed, he will be dead in 4 minutes, and you will have to explain why you were alone in a locked room with a dying admiral and no medical staff present. Brooks did not reach for his weapon. He did not move at all. He just stood there calculating, running scenarios the way men like him always did, looking for the play that kept him clean. I was checking on the patient, he said. I found the door unsecured. I came in to verify his status. With a syringe in your hand, I do not know what you are talking about. Rachel pointed at the floor. The syringe was lying 3 feet from the bed, clearly visible, the plunger depressed halfway. That syringe, right there, the one you were about to empty into his IV line, the one with your fingerprints on it. Brooks looked at the syringe. Then he looked at Rachel, and something shifted in his expression. The mask slipped, just for a fraction of a second, and underneath it Rachel saw what she had suspected since that first interrogation in the basement. Fear. Not fear of being caught, fear of failing. Fear of the people above him who had given the order and expected results. You do not know what you are involved in, Brooks said quietly. This is bigger than you, bigger than him, bigger than anything you can comprehend. I do not care how big it is. I care about the man in that bed whose heart is about to stop for the second time today. The monitors hit 180. Rachel turned her back on Brooks. She had no choice. The Admiral was dying right now, and Brooks was a threat she would have to deal with second. She checked the IV bag. Clear fluid, standard saline drip, but the injection port where Brooks had been working showed a tiny drop of milky residue. He had started pushing something before she burst in. Not the full dose. Maybe a quarter, maybe a third. Enough to destabilize, but maybe not enough to kill. Rachel grabbed the emergency call button and pressed it. Nothing happened. She pressed it again. Dead. The call system had been disabled. Olivia, she screamed toward the open door. Get a crash team up here now. Tell them VTAC, possible chemical exposure. I need amiodarone and a defibrillator. Olivia was already running. Rachel could hear her footsteps hammering down the corridor, her voice carrying through the empty floor as she screamed for help. Rachel turned back to the Admiral. His body was rigid. His hands were clenched into fists at his sides. The same muscle rigidity she had seen that morning, but milder. Whatever Brooks had pushed, it was the same compound, the same paralytic, but a smaller dose. Stay with me, Admiral, she said. Your heart is racing, but you are alive. I need you to stay alive. Your daughter is here. She is fighting for you. I need you to fight too. The monitor hit 188. Rachel knew the math. At this rate, his ventricles would lose coordination within 2 minutes. Once they started fibrillating instead of beating, blood flow to the brain would stop, and she would be right back where she started that morning. Except this time there was no precordial thump that would fix it. This time she needed drugs and a defibrillator and a team. Behind her, Brooks moved. She heard him before she saw him. The whisper of his shoe on the floor, the shift of his weight. She spun around just as he reached for the syringe on the ground. Rachel stomped on his hand. Brooks howled. His fingers crunched under her heel. He yanked his hand back and staggered upright, cradling his fingers against his chest. Do not touch that syringe, Rachel said. That is evidence. You are insane. I am a nurse protecting a patient. You are an NCIS agent trying to murder him. One of us belongs in this room, and it is not you. Brooks lunged at her, not for the syringe this time, for her throat. His good hand closed around her neck and squeezed. Rachel grabbed his wrist with both hands and twisted. She had learned that move during her Navy training, years ago, in a self-defense course she never thought she would use. His grip loosened just enough for her to drive her knee into his stomach. He doubled over. She brought her elbow down on the back of his neck. He dropped to one knee. 9:49 p.m. Rachel heard voices in the corridor, multiple voices, footsteps, the crash of a cart being wheeled at full speed. 3 nurses and a resident burst through the door. Behind them, Olivia, phone in hand, face wild with terror and fury. VTAC, Rachel shouted immediately. Heart rate approaching 200. Possible chemical agent in the IV line. He needs amiodarone, 150 milligrams IV push right now. Do not use the existing line. It is compromised. Start a new peripheral access in his left arm. and someone get that syringe off the floor into an evidence bag before this man destroys it. The resident froze for half a second, staring at Rachel in her rumpled scrubs with no badge and a man on his knees behind her. Then training kicked in and he moved. The nurses moved. The defibrillator powered up. Amiodarone was drawn. Brooks staggered to his feet. He looked at the room full of witnesses and made a decision that Rachel watched happen in real time behind his eyes. He could not finish the job. Not now. Not with 4 medical staff, a civilian attorney, and a woman who had already beaten him twice in one day, standing between him and the Admiral. This woman is an escaped prisoner, Brooks said, pointing at Rachel. She is under military custody for assault on this patient. She should not be in this room. The resident did not even look at him. He was pushing amiodarone and watching the monitor. I do not care if she is an escaped prisoner or the Queen of England, the resident said. She just called a textbook code and her assessment matches what I am seeing. Right now, she is more useful to this patient than you are. So either help or get out of my way. The monitor began to slow. 190, 185, 179. The amiodarone was working. 170, 162, 155. Rachel watched the numbers drop and felt her legs go weak. She grabbed the bed rail to keep herself upright. 140, 130, 122. Normal sinus rhythm. The Admiral's heart was beating on its own, steady, regular, alive. Rachel exhaled. Her whole body was trembling. Her neck throbbed where Brooks had grabbed her. Her heel ached from stomping on his hand. Her elbows were bruised. Her knuckles were still swollen from that morning. But he was alive. Olivia stepped forward. She looked at her father's face on the pillow. His color was coming back. His chest was rising and falling. The monitors beeped in steady rhythm. "Dad," she whispered. The Admiral's eyelids flickered. His lips moved. No sound came out, but his hand twitched on the blanket. Olivia took his hand and held it. Then she turned to Brooks. Her voice changed completely. Every trace of the frightened daughter vanished. What replaced it was the attorney who had won 37 federal cases and had never once backed down from a fight she believed in. "Agent Brooks, I observed you alone in this room with my father. The door was locked from the inside. The emergency call system was disabled. A syringe was found on the floor with an unknown substance. I have photographs of the syringe, the disabled call button, and the compromised IV line. I took them while Rachel was working on my father. I have also transmitted copies to my office, to a federal judge, and to a journalist at the Washington Post." Brooks's face went gray. "Additionally," Olivia continued, "I am in possession of a blood sample drawn from my father this morning that you failed to confiscate. That sample is currently being transported to an independent forensic laboratory at Georgetown University Medical Center by a courier I dispatched 20 minutes ago. By tomorrow morning, we will have certified independent toxicology results proving that someone introduced a synthetic paralytic compound into my father's system. Combined with the syringe evidence from tonight and your documented presence alone in this room, I believe any reasonable investigator would conclude that you were not protecting this patient, Agent Brooks. You were trying to kill him." 10:03 p.m. Hospital security arrived. Not military security, civilian hospital security, called by the resident who had decided that the situation in this room went far beyond a medical emergency. 2 security officers stepped in. One of them looked at Brooks. "Sir, we need you to step outside. I am a federal agent conducting an investigation. Sir, the attending physician has requested that all non-medical personnel clear this room. That includes federal agents. You do not have the authority to—" "Actually, they do," Olivia said. "Under Hospital Policy 7.4, the attending physician has absolute authority over patient access during a medical emergency. This is a medical emergency. You are not medical personnel. Leave." Brooks stood in the doorway for a long moment. He looked at Rachel. He looked at Olivia. He looked at the Admiral breathing steadily in the bed. And Rachel saw it again, that flicker of fear, deeper now, wider. He was losing control. "This is not over," he said. "No," Rachel agreed. "It is not." Brooks walked out. The security officers escorted him down the corridor. Rachel watched him go and felt something she had not allowed herself to feel since 9:42 that morning. Anger. Real anger. Not the cold, clinical focus she used during codes. Not the controlled urgency she channeled when patients were dying. This was different. This was personal. This man had tried to kill a helpless patient in his bed. He had framed her for a crime he committed. He had manipulated evidence, intimidated a lab technician, and used the full weight of the federal government to cover up an assassination attempt. And he had almost succeeded. "Rachel," she turned. The Admiral's eyes were open, not fully, not clearly, but open. Glassy and unfocused, but tracking her face with the sluggish determination of a man clawing his way back to consciousness. "Admiral, can you hear me?" His lips moved. His voice was a destroyed whisper, ravaged by intubation and chemical assault and 12 hours of induced coma. "Nurse, yes, I am here. You hit me." Rachel almost laughed. Of everything that had happened, of the conspiracy and the framing and the syringe and the chase, this man's first coherent thought was about the punch. "Yes, sir, I did. Hurt like hell." "Your heart stopped. I did not have a defibrillator." "Did it work?" "You are talking to me right now, so yes." The Admiral closed his eyes, opened them again. "The contract, the briefing." Olivia leaned in. "Dad, do not worry about that now." "No, listen." His voice was fading, but his grip on Olivia's hand tightened. "The files, my office, Pentagon, locked drawer, left side of the desk. Code is your mother's birthday. The evidence, all of it, everything I found. Get it before they do." "Dad!" "Olivia, they tried to kill me. They will try again. Get the files. Tonight." 10:19 p.m. The resident finished stabilizing the Admiral and ordered a full security lockdown on the room. New IV lines, new medications drawn from sealed pharmacy stock. 2 civilian hospital security officers posted inside the room, not outside. A direct line to the hospital administrator. Rachel stood in the corridor with Olivia. Both women were exhausted. Both were running on adrenaline and fury, and the stubborn refusal to quit that they had somehow recognized in each other from the very first moment in that conference room. "I need to get to the Pentagon," Olivia said. "His office, the files." "It is 10:20 at night. The Pentagon is not going to let a civilian attorney walk into an admiral's office and empty his desk." "I am not a civilian attorney tonight. I am his daughter and his designated power of attorney. I have the legal documents. I filed them 2 years ago when he had his first cardiac episode. Full access to his personal and professional affairs in the event of medical incapacity. Will that be enough? It will be enough to get me through the door. What happens after that depends on how fast Brooks moves. He will move fast. The moment he walked out of that room, he started making calls. He knows the evidence is slipping away from him. The syringe, the blood sample, your father being awake. Every minute that passes, his cover story gets weaker. "Then I do not have minutes to waste." Olivia pulled out her phone. "I am calling my contact at the post. Her name is Catherine Webb. She has been investigating defense contract corruption for 2 years. If I give her what we have so far, she can start building the public case while I secure the files." "What about me?" Olivia looked at her. "You are still technically an escaped prisoner. I am aware. If you go back to custody voluntarily and I get these files, we have a chance. A real chance. The blood sample at Georgetown, the syringe from tonight, Brooks's behavior, my father's testimony, and the Pentagon files. Combined, that is enough to take to a federal judge and blow this open. And if I do not go back, then Brooks uses your escape to destroy your credibility. He tells the judge you are unstable, dangerous, a threat. Every piece of evidence we have gets tainted by association with a fugitive. Rachel leaned against the wall. Her body ached in places she did not know could ache. Her neck was bruising where Brooks had grabbed her. Her hands were shaking from exhaustion. "I will go back," she said, "but I need something from you first. Name it. Promise me you will not let them move him. Not to another hospital, not to another floor, not out of that room. He stays here with civilian security until this is over. I promise. And promise me that when this is done, when the truth comes out, you will make sure people know what really happened in that hallway this morning. Not the camera footage, not the headlines, what actually happened." Olivia took Rachel's hand, squeezed it hard. "I promise." 10:31 p.m. Rachel walked back to the conference room in the basement. She climbed through the maintenance panel, moved the filing cabinet back into place, changed out of the scrubs, and sat down in the metal chair. 3 minutes later, the MP checked the window. He saw the prisoner sitting quietly at the table, right where he had left her. He moved on. Rachel sat alone and stared at the ceiling. Somewhere above her, the Admiral was alive and awake and guarded by people who actually wanted to protect him. Somewhere across the city, a courier was delivering a vial of blood to a lab that would prove the truth. Somewhere in a newsroom, a phone was about to ring with the story that would change everything. And somewhere in this building, Daniel Brooks was pacing and planning and making desperate calls to people whose names Rachel did not yet know, but would soon. She closed her eyes. Her knuckles throbbed. Her neck burned. Every muscle in her body screamed for rest. But for the first time since 9:42 that morning, Rachel Morgan felt something she had not allowed herself to feel. Not hope, not yet. Certainty. She had been right. About the poison, about Brooks, about the conspiracy, about everything. And now for the first time, she was not the only one who knew it. 10:44 p.m. Olivia Caldwell pulled into the Pentagon's south parking lot. She killed the engine and sat for a moment, staring at the massive building through her windshield. Her father had walked these corridors for 40 years. He had dedicated his life to this institution, to the Navy, to the country. And someone inside that institution had tried to murder him for doing his job. She grabbed the power of attorney documents from her briefcase, checked her phone one more time for the confirmation text from the Georgetown Courier, and opened her car door. The text was there. Sample received. Processing begins in 1 hour. Results by 6 a.m. 6 a.m. In 7 hours and 16 minutes, the world would have proof. Olivia walked toward the entrance. Badge ready, documents ready. Her father's voice echoing in her head. Locked drawer, left side of the desk. Code is your mother's birthday. The Pentagon's night security was lighter than daytime, but still formidable. 3 checkpoints, ID verification, visitor log, an escort required for all non-credentialed personnel. Olivia presented her identification, her power of attorney documents, and a medical authorization letter she had printed at the hospital. The duty officer reviewed everything, made 2 phone calls, and assigned her a military escort, a young lieutenant who looked like he would rather be anywhere else. "Ma'am, you have 30 minutes, the lieutenant said. "I will accompany you to the Admiral's office and remain present during your visit." "That is fine." They walked through corridors that Olivia knew from childhood. Her father had brought her here when she was 12, showed her his office, let her sit in his chair. She remembered thinking it was the safest place in the world. It did not feel safe anymore. 11:07 p.m. The lieutenant opened the door to Admiral Caldwell's office. It was neat, organized, exactly the way her father kept everything. Books aligned on shelves, framed commendations on the walls, a photograph of Olivia's mother on the desk, smiling in that way she had, warm and knowing, as if she could see everything that was coming and was not afraid of any of it. Olivia went to the desk. Left side, locked drawer. She entered her mother's birthday. 03171952. March 17th, 1952. The lock clicked. She pulled the drawer open. Inside was a thick manila envelope, sealed with tape, with 2 words written on the front in her father's handwriting. For Olivia. She picked it up. It was heavy. She could feel the edges of documents inside, the bulk of photographs, the weight of something that had nearly cost her father his life. "Ma'am, are you finding what you need?" the lieutenant asked from the doorway. "Yes," Olivia said. "I am." She tucked the envelope into her briefcase, closed the drawer, locked it again. 11:12 p.m. They were walking back to the corridor when Olivia's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Ms. Caldwell, you are making a mistake. Return the contents of that drawer and this ends quietly. Refuse and your father's medical prognosis will deteriorate rapidly. You have until midnight." Olivia stopped walking. She read the message twice, 3 times. Then she screenshotted it, forwarded it to Catherine Webb at the Post, and to the federal judge she had contacted earlier that evening, and deleted nothing. She looked at the lieutenant. "I need to leave, now." "Ma'am, is everything all right?" "No, nothing is all right, but it is about to be." 11:18 p.m. Olivia was back in her car, briefcase on the passenger seat, engine running. She pulled out of the Pentagon lot and merged onto the highway. Her phone rang. Catherine Webb. "Olivia, I just got your forward. That text is a direct threat against a hospitalized military officer made to his legal representative. That is witness intimidation, obstruction of justice, and potentially conspiracy to commit murder. I can have this in front of an editor in 20 minutes. Do it." "Are you sure? Once this goes public, there is no pulling it back. Whoever sent that message, whoever is behind this, they will know you have the files. They will come after you." "Catherine, my father is lying in a hospital bed because someone poisoned him to prevent him from exposing a multi-billion-dollar fraud. A nurse who saved his life is sitting in a jail cell, charged with a crime she did not commit. An NCIS agent tried to murder my father a second time tonight, and I have a syringe, a blood sample, and a filing cabinet full of evidence that proves all of it. So yes, I am sure. Run it. Front page, tomorrow morning. Good. 11:29 p.m. Olivia drove through the dark streets of Washington with her father's envelope on the seat beside her, a death threat on her phone, and the absolute unshakable certainty that by morning, everything was going to change. In the basement of St. Jude Medical Center, Rachel Morgan slept for the first time in 37 hours. Her head rested on her arms. Her bruised hands lay open on the cold table. The MP checked the window every 15 minutes and saw a woman who looked defeated. He did not know that the woman in that chair had kicked down a door, fought a federal agent, stopped an assassination, and helped set in motion a chain of events that would reach the front page of the Washington Post, the floor of the United States Senate, and the highest levels of the Department of Defense. He saw a prisoner. The world was about to see something very different. 11:58 p.m. Somewhere in a Georgetown laboratory, a centrifuge spun Admiral Caldwell's blood at 12,000 revolutions per minute, separating plasma from cells, truth from silence, evidence from shadow. The machine did not know what it was processing. It did not know that the vial it held contained the proof of a conspiracy that reached into the Pentagon. It did not know that a nurse had risked everything to retrieve it, that a lab technician had risked his career to hide it, that an attorney had risked her safety to deliver it. The centrifuge just spun, and the truth, for the first time in 14 hours, was finally moving faster than the lie. 5:47 a.m. Rachel woke to the sound of the door opening. Her neck was stiff. Her hands were numb from sleeping on them. Every joint in her body felt like it had been filled with gravel. A different MP stood in the doorway, younger than the night shift officer. Nervous, he kept shifting his weight from one foot to the other, like a man who had been given instructions he did not fully understand. "Ma'am, you have a visitor." Rachel lifted her head. "My attorney?" "No, ma'am, it is the hospital administrator and two people from the Department of Justice." Rachel's stomach tightened. Department of Justice, not NCIS, not military, Federal Civilian Authority. That meant something had changed overnight. Something big enough to pull jurisdiction away from Brooks and hand it to a completely different branch of the government. She straightened up in her chair, rolled her shoulders, pressed her swollen knuckles against the cold table to dull the ache. "Send them in." The hospital administrator came first. Dr. Patricia Winslow, a woman Rachel had seen in the hallways for years, but had never spoken to directly. Silver hair, reading glasses on a chain around her neck. The kind of face that looked like it had been shaped by 40 years of impossible decisions. Behind her, two people in dark suits, a man and a woman. Both carried federal credentials. Both had the controlled intensity of people who had been woken up in the middle of the night and told something that made them drive very fast to get here. Dr. Winslow sat down across from Rachel. The two DOJ officials stood behind her. "Nurse Morgan," Winslow said. "My name is Dr. Patricia Winslow. I am the Chief Administrator of St. Jude Medical Center. I owe you an apology." Rachel blinked. Of everything she had expected to hear, an apology was not on the list. At approximately 5:15 this morning, I received a call from the United States Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia. I was informed that independent toxicology results from a blood sample taken from Admiral James Caldwell confirmed the presence of a synthetic paralytic compound in his system. A compound that was not prescribed, not administered by hospital staff, and not consistent with any medical treatment he was receiving. Rachel did not move. She did not breathe. She just listened. I was further informed that a syringe recovered from the Admiral's room last night contained the same compound in concentrated form. Fingerprint analysis identified the prints on that syringe as belonging to NCIS Special Agent Daniel Brooks. The room went silent. Rachel felt something crack open inside her chest. Not relief, not yet. Something bigger. Vindication. Proof. The thing she had been screaming about since 9:42 yesterday morning was finally, officially, undeniably real. "Where is Brooks?" Rachel asked. The female DOJ official stepped forward. "Special Agent Brooks was taken into federal custody at 4:22 this morning at his residence in Arlington, Virginia. He has been charged with attempted murder, obstruction of justice, evidence tampering, and conspiracy. Additional charges are pending." "Who gave him the order?" The official exchanged a glance with her partner. "That is an active investigation. I cannot disclose details at this time, but I can tell you that Agent Brooks is cooperating." Rachel looked at her. "He is talking?" "He began talking within 30 minutes of being arrested. What he has disclosed so far has triggered notifications to multiple federal agencies and at least 3 members of Congress." Dr. Winslow leaned forward. "Nurse Morgan, the criminal charges against you are being formally suspended as of this morning. The military custody order has been rescinded. You are free to leave this room." Free. Such a small word. 4 letters. Rachel had not heard it directed at her in 20 hours. She looked at her hands on the table. Bruised, swollen. The hands that had punched an admiral in the chest, fought a federal agent, and retrieved the evidence that was now dismantling a conspiracy. "I want to see the admiral," Rachel said. "He is awake. He has been asking for you." 6:12 a.m. Rachel walked out of the basement holding room and into the elevator. She pressed the button for the 4th floor. The doors closed. She was alone for the first time in 20 hours, with no one watching, no one guarding, no one accusing. She leaned against the elevator wall and closed her eyes. She did not cry. She wanted to. God, she wanted to. But 14 years of ICU nursing had trained her to hold everything inside until the crisis was over. And this crisis was not over yet. Brooks was arrested, but someone had given him orders. The syringe was evidence, but the conspiracy went higher. The Admiral was awake, but the briefing he had been trying to deliver was still undelivered. The elevator opened on the 4th floor. Rachel stepped out. The corridor was transformed. 2 civilian security officers at the nurses' station. 2 more outside the Admiral's door. A nurse Rachel recognized from the day shift was checking monitors. Everything that should have been in place yesterday morning was in place now. One day too late. Rachel walked to the Admiral's room. The security officer at the door checked her name against a list. She was on it. He stepped aside. She walked in. Admiral James Caldwell was sitting up in bed, not fully upright, propped against pillows at about 30 degrees, with new IV lines in both arms and a cardiac monitor showing steady normal sinus rhythm. His face was pale. His eyes were sunken. A dark bruise spread across his sternum where Rachel's fist had landed 20 hours earlier. But he was alive, and he was looking at her with an expression she had never seen directed at herself before. Not gratitude, not pity, recognition. The way one soldier looks at another after surviving something no one else will ever understand. Olivia sat in a chair beside the bed. She looked like she had not slept. Her blazer was wrinkled. Her hair was pulled back in a knot that was coming undone. But her eyes were sharp and alert, and when she saw Rachel, she stood up. "Rachel, how is he?" "Stubborn. He tried to get out of bed an hour ago to call the Secretary of Defense." The Admiral grunted. "I did not try. I succeeded. The nurses put me back." Rachel walked to the bedside. She checked his monitors out of habit. Heart rate 74. Blood pressure 128/82. Oxygen saturation 97%. All stable. All good. "You look terrible," the Admiral said. "You look worse." He laughed, then winced. The fractured sternum made laughing painful. "I deserve that. You deserve bed rest and about 3 days of uninterrupted sleep. What I deserve is to finish what I started." The Admiral's voice hardened. The military commander emerged through the battered old man like steel showing through rust. "Olivia brought me the files. I have been reviewing them since 4 this morning. Dad, the doctor said I should rest. I will rest when the people who tried to kill me are in handcuffs. Brooks was not acting alone, Nurse Morgan. You know that." "I know. He was a tool. A weapon pointed at me by someone with the authority to redirect a federal investigation and the resources to obtain a synthetic paralytic agent that is not available on any commercial market. That compound was military grade, restricted, classified. The number of people in this country who could access it is fewer than 50. Rachel pulled up a chair and sat down. "Who?" The Admiral looked at Olivia. Olivia opened the manila envelope that had been sitting on her lap and pulled out a stack of documents, photographs, and financial records. "The weapons contract my father was investigating is called Project Leviathan," Olivia said. $11.3 billion allocated over 7 years for the development of a next-generation naval defense system. On paper, it is managed by a company called Meridian Defense Solutions. In reality, Meridian is a shell. It was incorporated 18 months ago with no prior defense contracts, no manufacturing capability, and no personnel with relevant technical expertise. So where is the money going? That is what my father found. Olivia pulled out a financial flowchart. The funds passed through Meridian into a network of 12 subsidiary companies, each registered in a different state, each controlled by the same group of beneficial owners. Those owners trace back to 3 individuals. She laid 3 photographs on the bed. Rachel looked at them. She did not recognize the first 2. Middle-aged men in suits, the kind of faces that populated Washington like wallpaper, interchangeable and forgettable. But the third photograph made her blood freeze. "That is Rear Admiral Vincent Cross," Caldwell said, Deputy Director of Naval Acquisitions. "He is the man who approved the Leviathan contract. He is also the man who oversees NCIS operational assignments, which means he is the man who put Brooks on my case." "Cross assigned Brooks to investigate you?" "Cross assigned Brooks to silence me. The investigation was cover. Brooks was never looking for truth. He was there to build a narrative that would discredit me if the poison failed." The unstable admiral with cardiac problems who was assaulted by a nurse with a bad record. If I had died in that hallway, the story would have been a tragic medical incident. If I survived but was discredited, the story would have been an old man losing his grip on reality. Either way, the briefing never happens and the contract survives. Rachel stared at the photograph of Vincent Cross. She burned the face into her memory. "Brooks is cooperating with the DOJ," she said. "They told me he started talking within 30 minutes of being arrested." The admiral nodded slowly. "That is both good and dangerous. Brooks will give them everything he has on Cross because Brooks is a survivor. He will trade up to save himself. But Cross is not the top. Cross is a middleman. The real money, the real power, the real architects of this fraud, they are civilians, defense industry executives, lobbyists, people who do not wear uniforms and do not carry badges and do not show up in military databases. Then how do we find them? We do not have to find them. The money finds them. Every dollar in this contract leaves a trail. Olivia has the financial records. The DOJ has Brooks's testimony, and I have something else." The admiral reached under his pillow with obvious effort and pulled out a small black USB drive. "What is that?" Rachel asked. "Insurance. I have been building this case for 8 months. I did not trust the Pentagon's secure servers because the people I was investigating had access to those servers. So I kept a parallel record. Every document, every email, every transaction, every communication I intercepted between Cross and Meridian Defense Solutions. It is all on this drive, encrypted, backed up in 3 locations that only Olivia knows." He held the drive out to Rachel. She stared at it. "Why are you giving this to me?" "Because in approximately 2 hours, the DOJ is going to walk into this room and take my formal statement. They will ask for all evidence in my possession. I will give them the files from my office. I will give them my testimony. I will cooperate fully. But I want a copy of this drive in the hands of someone outside the system. Someone who has already proven she cannot be bought, intimidated, or controlled. Someone I trust. You do not know me. I know you punched me in the chest to restart my heart. I know you fought a federal agent to stop him from killing me. I know you broke out of custody, retrieved evidence, and came back voluntarily because you believed it was the right thing to do. I have commanded thousands of sailors and Marines in my career, Nurse Morgan. I know courage when I see it. And what you did yesterday was the most courageous thing I have witnessed in 48 years of service." Rachel took the drive. It was warm from being under his pillow. Small, light, the weight of nothing and the weight of everything. "Keep it safe," the admiral said. "If the system works, you will never need to use it. But if the system fails, that drive is the only thing standing between the truth and $11 billion worth of reasons to bury it." 7:41 a.m. The Washington Post hit doorsteps and screens across the country. The headline read, "NCIS agent arrested in attempted murder of 4-star admiral. Pentagon weapons contract under federal investigation." Catherine Webb's byline. Front page, above the fold. The story laid out everything. The poisoning, the framing of Rachel Morgan, the syringe recovered from the admiral's room, the independent toxicology results from Georgetown, the financial records linking Rear Admiral Vincent Cross to Meridian Defense Solutions. The $11.3 billion contract built on fraud. By 8 a.m., every cable news network had picked it up. By 8:30, the Secretary of Defense issued a statement announcing an immediate suspension of the Leviathan contract and a full internal review of naval acquisitions. By 9, 3 senators called for emergency hearings. By 9:15, the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee demanded a classified briefing from the DOJ. And by 9:30, the story that had started with a grainy security camera clip of a nurse punching an admiral in a hospital hallway had become the biggest defense corruption scandal in a decade. Rachel watched the coverage from the admiral's room on a television mounted on the wall. She sat in the same chair she had pulled up an hour earlier. Olivia sat beside her. The admiral watched from his bed, his face unreadable. The footage from yesterday morning played on every channel. The same clip that had been used to destroy Rachel was now being recontextualized. Anchors explained the precordial thump. Medical experts confirmed its validity in extreme circumstances. Former nurses called in to describe situations where outdated techniques had saved lives when modern equipment was not available. Rachel Morgan was no longer the unstable nurse who attacked a war hero. She was the nurse who had saved his life. And then the second twist hit. 9:44 a.m. Olivia's phone rang. She answered, listened for 30 seconds, and her face went white. "What?" Rachel asked. Olivia lowered the phone. That was Catherine Webb. Brooks gave the DOJ a full list of everyone involved in the conspiracy. 12 names, military and civilian. The DOJ executed arrest warrants this morning, starting at 6 a.m. That is good. Rachel, one of the names on the list is Dr. Alan Moreno. The room went completely still. Dr. Moreno, the Admiral's attending physician. The man who had admitted him to the cardiac wing. The man who had ordered the breakfast tray. The man who had left the hospital before the evening shift and had not been reachable by phone all night. Moreno ordered the tray, Rachel said slowly. He was the attending. He had full authority over the Admiral's diet, medication, and care plan. He could have added anything to that breakfast without anyone questioning it. According to Brooks, Moreno was recruited by Cross 6 months ago. He was paid $200,000 to ensure the Admiral's cardiac episode appeared natural. He ordered the breakfast tray with the compound mixed into the orange juice. He scheduled himself off shift before the collapse was supposed to happen, so he would not be present when it occurred. And the empty hallway, the missing crash cart, the absent security, all coordinated through Brooks. But the timing was Moreno's. He knew exactly when the compound would take effect, based on the dosage and the Admiral's body weight. The collapse was supposed to happen at 9:45 in the hallway with no medical personnel within reach. The Admiral was supposed to be dead before anyone found him. Rachel felt sick. I got to him 3 minutes early. He was standing in the hallway at 9:37. The compound hit faster than Moreno calculated, which means your coffee intervention may have saved his life twice. You took the coffee away, which forced him to walk back toward his room, which put him in the hallway closer to where you could reach him. And then when the compound hit, you were right there. The Admiral spoke from his bed. His voice was quiet but steady. Alan Moreno. I have known him for 12 years. He was at my wife's funeral. He held my hand when they told me about the arrhythmia. Nobody said anything. There was nothing to say. The betrayal of a man you trusted with your life was not something words could fix. 10:08 a.m. The DOJ team arrived. 4 attorneys, 2 FBI agents, and a federal marshal. They set up in the conference room on the 2nd floor and began taking the Admiral's formal statement. Rachel was not part of that process. She sat in the hallway outside the conference room and waited, not because anyone told her to, because she needed to be close. She needed to know that the system was working, that the evidence was being recorded, that the truth was being documented by people with the authority to act on it. At 11:15, one of the FBI agents stepped out and approached her. Nurse Morgan, we would like to take your statement as well. Now? If you are willing, your account is a critical part of the timeline. The poisoning, the cardiac arrest, the precordial thump, the arrest, The confrontation with Brooks in the Admiral's room. You are the only witness who was present for all of it. Rachel stood up. Her legs ached. Her back ached. Everything ached. But she walked into that conference room and she sat down and she told them everything. She started with the coffee in the hallway, and she did not stop until she reached the moment she walked back into her holding cell and sat down in the metal chair and waited for the world to catch up to the truth. It took 3 hours. When she finished, the lead attorney looked at her across the table with an expression she could not read. Nurse Morgan, I want to be candid with you. What you did yesterday was extraordinary. It was also, from a strictly procedural standpoint, deeply problematic. You escaped military custody. You entered a restricted area without authorization. You physically confronted a federal agent. Any one of those actions could result in serious charges. Rachel met his eyes. I understand. However, given the totality of the circumstances, including the fact that Agent Brooks was actively attempting to murder a patient at the time of your intervention, this office is recommending that no federal charges be filed against you. The military custody order has already been rescinded. The assault charges have been suspended pending a formal review. Suspended, not dropped. The review will determine the final disposition, but between us, Nurse Morgan, I have been a federal prosecutor for 22 years. I have never seen a case where the evidence more clearly supports the conclusion that a person acted to save a life under impossible circumstances. I would be very surprised if those charges survive the week. 2:17 p.m. Rachel walked out of the conference room and found Olivia waiting in the hallway. The younger woman looked different. The exhaustion was still there, but something else had replaced the tension, something looser and lighter. It is done, Olivia said. The DOJ has everything, the files, the financial records, the USB drive contents, Brooks's full testimony, Moreno's arrest record, and the toxicology results from Georgetown. Federal warrants have been executed on Rear Admiral Cross and 6 civilian associates. Meridian Defense Solutions has been shut down pending investigation. The Leviathan contract is terminated. All of it? All of it. $11.3 billion in fraudulent defense spending, exposed and dismantled in less than 24 hours. Rachel leaned against the wall. It was not 24 hours. It was 8 months. Your father spent 8 months building that case. I just happened to be standing in a hallway when they tried to stop him. You did more than stand in a hallway, Rachel. I punched an old man in the chest. Olivia laughed. It was the first real laugh Rachel had heard from her. You punched my father in the chest. He will never let either of us forget it. 3:02 p.m. Rachel went back to the Admiral's room one more time. He was sleeping. The monitors beeped steadily. His color was better. His breathing was even. She stood at the foot of his bed and watched the rhythm of his heartbeat on the screen. 72 beats per minute. Steady, strong. 29 hours ago, that line had been flat. 29 hours ago, she had stood over this man on a cold hallway floor and made a decision that every protocol, every guideline, every modern training manual said was wrong, and it had saved his life. Rachel reached into her pocket and felt the USB drive. Small, warm, still there. She did not know if she would ever need to use it. She hoped she would not. She hoped the system would work, that the DOJ would follow through, that the guilty would be held accountable, and the truth would stand on its own. But she had been a Navy nurse. She had seen systems fail. She had seen truth get buried under paperwork and politics and the quiet machinery of power protecting itself. So she kept the drive, just in case. 3:14 p.m. Rachel walked out of St. Jude Medical Center through the main entrance. No escort, no handcuffs, no cameras. The sunlight hit her face, and she stopped. She stood on the sidewalk and let the warmth sink into her skin, and she breathed. Deep, slow. The kind of breath you take when you have been drowning and you finally break the surface. Her phone buzzed. A text from Olivia. Dad wants you to know he is requesting you as his primary nurse for the remainder of his recovery. He says, and I quote, anyone who can punch that hard and save a life deserves to check his blood pressure. Rachel smiled, her first real smile in 30 hours. She texted back, tell him I will be there tomorrow morning, and tell him if I catch him with regular coffee again, the next punch will be harder. She put the phone in her pocket and started walking. Behind her, the hospital stood tall against the afternoon sky. Inside it, the machinery of justice was grinding forward, warrants being served, statements being recorded, evidence being cataloged, a conspiracy being dismantled piece by people who finally had the proof they needed. And somewhere in a locked federal holding facility, Daniel Brooks sat in a cell, not so different from the one Rachel had occupied 20 hours earlier. He stared at the wall the way she had stared at the wall. He felt the weight of concrete and silence the way she had felt it. But there was one difference. Rachel had sat in that cell knowing the truth. Brooks sat in his knowing the lie was over. 2 weeks passed. 14 days that reshaped the United States Department of Defense from the inside out. Rachel Morgan spent the first 3 of those days exactly where she said she would be, at Admiral Caldwell's bedside, checking his vitals, adjusting his medications, and arguing with him about his diet. I do not need decaf, the Admiral said on Thursday morning. I have survived 2 assassination attempts. I think regular coffee is the least of my concerns. Your resting heart rate is still elevated. Your sternum fracture needs another 4 weeks to heal. And your potassium levels are borderline because you refuse to eat the bananas I keep putting on your tray. I hate bananas. And I hate coding patients who refuse to follow medical advice. Eat the banana, Admiral. He ate the banana. Olivia sat in the corner of the room during these exchanges and smiled in a way that told Rachel this was the first time she had seen her father let anyone tell him what to do since her mother died. But outside that hospital room, the world was burning. Brooks talked. He talked for 6 straight days, 12 hours a day, seated across from federal prosecutors with his attorney beside him and a recording device on the table. He gave them everything: names, dates, account numbers, communication logs, operational details, the complete architecture of a conspiracy that had been running inside the Pentagon for nearly 2 years. Rear Admiral Vincent Cross was arrested at his home in McLean, Virginia, at 6:14 a.m. on the morning the Post story broke. He said nothing during the arrest. He said nothing during processing. He said nothing during his initial appearance before a federal magistrate. Then his attorney made a mistake. Cross's lawyer, a high-powered defense attorney named Richard Tate, filed a motion arguing that Cross had been acting within the scope of his official duties and was therefore protected by sovereign immunity. The motion included a detailed description of Cross's role in the Leviathan program, which inadvertently confirmed his direct involvement in the contract's approval process. The federal prosecutors used that filing to expand the investigation. 3 more warrants were issued within 48 hours. Dr. Alan Moreno was arrested at Dulles International Airport, trying to board a flight to Sao Paulo, Brazil. He had a one-way ticket, a carry-on bag with $200,000 in cash, and a burner phone containing encrypted messages between himself and Cross, dating back 6 months. When federal marshals stopped him at the gate, he did not run. He did not resist. He sat down in the nearest chair and put his face in his hands and said, "I knew this was going to happen." Rachel heard about Moreno's arrest from Olivia, who heard it from Catherine Webb, who had a source inside the DOJ. Rachel was changing the Admiral's IV bag when Olivia told her. She stopped moving, just for a second. Then she finished the IV change, checked the drip rate, and noted the time on the chart. "Are you okay?" Olivia asked. "Moreno was the attending physician who admitted your father. He designed the care plan. He ordered the tray. He chose the dosage based on your father's body weight and cardiac history. He used his medical expertise to calculate the exact amount of paralytic needed to stop your father's heart in a way that would look like natural cardiac arrest." Rachel set the chart down. I have worked alongside doctors my entire career. I have trusted them with my patients' lives. Every single day I hand a chart to a physician, and I trust that what they write on it is meant to heal. Rachel, he turned that trust into a weapon. He used the one thing patients cannot survive without, their faith in their doctor, and he used it to commit murder. The Admiral spoke from his bed. That is why they chose him. A stranger with a syringe is suspicious. A trusted physician with a breakfast order is invisible. On the fifth day, the Senate Armed Services Committee convened emergency hearings. Catherine Webb's reporting had created enough public pressure that the committee had no choice. The hearings were classified, closed door, but leaks came out fast. Brooks testified first. He described how Cross had recruited him 18 months earlier, offering $250,000 deposited into an offshore account in exchange for managing what Cross called operational security around the Leviathan contract. Brooks explained that his job was to monitor anyone who got too close to the fraud, to discredit them, redirect investigations, or, if necessary, neutralize them. The word neutralize caused the committee chairman to stop the hearing for a 15-minute recess. When they resumed, Brooks was asked directly how many people had been neutralized before Admiral Caldwell. Brooks's answer was 3. 3 other military officers who had raised questions about the Leviathan contract over the past 18 months. One had been forced into early retirement after a fabricated harassment complaint. One had been transferred to a remote posting in Guam after his security clearance was mysteriously revoked. And one, a Navy captain named Thomas Rivera, had died in a single-car accident on I-95 7 months earlier. The committee demanded an immediate reinvestigation of Captain Rivera's death. Rachel learned about Rivera from the news. She was sitting in the hospital cafeteria eating a sandwich she did not taste when his photograph appeared on the television screen. A 46-year-old Navy captain with a wife and 2 teenage daughters who had died in what was ruled an accident on a rainy Tuesday night. An accident. Like the Admiral's cardiac event was supposed to be a medical incident. Like her assault charge was supposed to be an open and shut case. Like $11 billion was supposed to disappear into shell companies without anyone noticing. Rachel put down her sandwich. She was not hungry anymore. On the 7th day, the civilian names started falling. Meridian Defense Solutions was not just a shell company. It was a machine. Built by 3 defense industry executives who had spent decades learning how the Pentagon procurement system worked and exactly where its vulnerabilities were. The first was Gerald Hatch, former CEO of a legitimate defense contractor called Trident Systems, who had retired 5 years earlier with a golden parachute worth $40 million. Hatch had used his contacts inside the Navy to identify the Leviathan program as a target, then created Meridian as the vehicle to capture the contract. The second was Sandra Liu, a former Pentagon budget analyst who had moved to the private sector and built a consulting firm that specialized in helping defense companies navigate the federal acquisition process. Liu had designed the network of 12 subsidiary companies that laundered the Leviathan funds. The third name hit Rachel like a physical blow. Margaret Caldwell Webb, the Admiral's late wife's sister, his sister-in-law, Olivia's aunt. Margaret had been the silent partner behind Meridian's financing. She had provided the initial capital through a family trust that traced back to the Caldwell estate. Money that the Admiral's wife had left when she died. Money that was supposed to go to veterans' charities. Olivia found out on a Tuesday afternoon. Catherine Webb called her. Olivia listened for 45 seconds, said thank you, and hung up. Then she walked into the hospital bathroom and did not come out for 20 minutes. When she came out, her eyes were red, but her voice was steady. "Did you know?" she asked her father. The Admiral's face told the answer before his words did. The color drained. His jaw tightened. His hands gripped the bed rails until his knuckles turned white. "Margaret?" he whispered. She used Mom's trust, the money Mom left for the veterans programs. Margaret funneled it through a family holding company into Meridian's capital fund. The Admiral closed his eyes. I did not know. Dad, she is family. She was your mother's sister. She sat at our Thanksgiving table for 30 years. She held your hand at the funeral. His voice broke. Not from the sternum, from somewhere deeper. And she used your mother's money to fund the program that nearly killed me. Rachel stood by the window and said nothing. There were moments in nursing when the only thing you could do was be present. Not fix, not comfort, just witness. This was one of those moments. Olivia sat on the edge of her father's bed. She took his hand the way she had taken it the night she first arrived at the hospital, when he was unconscious and she did not know if he would ever wake up. We will get through this, she said. I know. I mean it, Dad. I know, sweetheart. I know. On the 9th day, Rachel received a phone call from a number she did not recognize. She answered it in the hospital parking garage during her lunch break. Nurse Morgan, this is Admiral Patricia Hayes, Chief of Naval Personnel. I am calling to inform you that your nursing license review has been scheduled for Friday of this week. A joint medical and naval review board will convene at 0900 at the Bethesda Naval Medical Center, room 412. Your attendance is requested. Rachel's stomach tightened. She had known this was coming. The criminal charges might be suspended. The DOJ might have cleared her, but the nursing board operated on different rules. Medical protocol was medical protocol. She had performed an outdated, unsanctioned procedure. She had fractured a patient's sternum. She had acted outside the boundaries of modern cardiac care guidelines. In the eyes of the board, it did not matter why. It mattered what. I understand, Rachel said. I will be there. Nurse Morgan, I want you to know that this review is not a foregone conclusion. The board will evaluate the totality of the circumstances. You will have the opportunity to present your account and call witnesses. Thank you, Admiral. She hung up. She leaned against her car. The USB drive was still in her pocket. She had carried it every day since the Admiral had given it to her. Not because she needed it, because it reminded her of something he had said. Rules are written for stability. Heroes are made in chaos. Friday was 4 days away. 4 days to prepare a defense for a decision she had made in less than 3 seconds. On Thursday night, the night before the hearing, Rachel sat in her apartment for the first time in almost 2 weeks without somewhere to be, someone to save, or something to fight. The silence was deafening. She looked at her hands. The bruises on her knuckles had faded to yellow-green. The swelling was gone. They looked like normal hands again, nurses' hands. The hands of a woman who had spent 14 years holding, healing, pressing, pushing, doing everything in her power to keep people alive. Tomorrow, a board of strangers would decide whether those hands would ever work again. Her phone buzzed. A text from Olivia. Are you ready for tomorrow? Rachel typed back. No. 3 dots appeared. Then Olivia's response. Good. The best people never are. Friday, 9 a.m., room 412. The review board consisted of 5 members, 2 Navy medical officers, 1 civilian physician, 1 hospital administrator, 1 representative from the nursing board. They sat behind a long table with files and laptops and water glasses and the careful, neutral expressions of people who took their responsibilities seriously. Rachel sat at a smaller table facing them. She wore clean scrubs, not a suit, not a dress. Scrubs, because that was who she was. Not a defendant, not a hero, a nurse. Olivia sat behind her in the gallery as her legal counsel. They had agreed the night before that Rachel would speak for herself. No legal arguments, no procedural defenses, just the truth. The board chairman, Captain William Reeves, opened the proceedings. Nurse Morgan, this review concerns your actions on the morning of October 14th at St. Jude Medical Center, specifically the performance of a precordial thump on Admiral James Caldwell, during a cardiac arrest event. The board acknowledges the extraordinary circumstances surrounding this incident, including the subsequent criminal investigation and the arrest of multiple individuals. However, our mandate is narrowly focused on clinical protocol. The question before us is whether your actions met the standard of care expected of a registered nurse in the ICU setting. I understand, Rachel said. Walk us through your clinical decision-making in that moment. Rachel took a breath. At approximately 9:42 a.m., Admiral Caldwell experienced sudden cardiac arrest in the hallway of the cardiac wing. I had been with him for approximately 5 minutes prior and had observed escalating symptoms including involuntary muscle tremor, jaw rigidity, and self-reported metallic taste. When he collapsed, I lowered him to the floor and confirmed absence of pulse. I initiated CPR immediately. After approximately 90 seconds of compressions with no response and no return of spontaneous circulation, I assessed my resources. There was no crash cart, no defibrillator, no medical team, no other staff of any kind within reach. The emergency call system did not produce a response. I was alone with a patient in cardiac arrest and no equipment. And the precordial thump? I made the decision to perform a precordial thump based on the following factors. The patient had been in arrest for approximately 90 seconds. CPR alone was not restoring rhythm. No advanced cardiac support was available or incoming. The arrest presented as sudden onset, consistent with a shockable rhythm that might respond to mechanical cardioversion. I had prior training in the technique during my Navy service and had personally witnessed it succeed in a field emergency. I determined that the risk of the procedure was outweighed by the certainty of death if I did not attempt it. You are aware that the precordial thump is no longer recommended by current AHA guidelines? I am. And you performed it anyway? Yes. Why? Rachel paused. She looked at the 5 faces behind the table. Career professionals, rule followers, people who had built their lives around the sanctity of protocol and the discipline of evidence-based medicine. Because the guidelines assume you have options, she said. They assume there is a crash cart within reach. They assume there is a defibrillator available. They assume there is a team responding. They assume the system is working. On that morning, in that hallway, none of those assumptions were true. The system had been deliberately sabotaged. I was left with a dying patient and no tools except my training and my hands. The guidelines did not account for that scenario because no guideline can account for someone intentionally stripping a hospital hallway of every piece of life-saving equipment to ensure a patient dies. I did not violate protocol. I operated in a space where protocol did not exist. The board members exchanged glances. Captain Reeves opened his mouth to ask another question, but before he could speak, the door at the back of the room opened. Admiral James Caldwell walked in. He was in full dress uniform, navy blue with 4 gold stars on each shoulder, ribbons covering his left chest, a career of service visible in every thread. He moved slowly, carefully, one hand pressed lightly against his fractured sternum, but he moved under his own power. Upright, steady, alive. Every person in the room stood. Caldwell walked to the front. He did not ask permission. He did not wait to be acknowledged. He stood beside Rachel's table and faced the board. Admiral Caldwell, Captain Reeves said, this is unexpected. You are welcome to provide testimony if you wish, but you should know this review concerns clinical protocol, not the criminal investigation. I am aware of the scope of this review, Captain, and I am here to address it directly. He turned to the board. His voice filled the room the way it had filled briefing rooms and war rooms and command centers for nearly 5 decades. 14 days ago, I was standing in a hallway in this hospital and my heart stopped. I did not know it at the time, but I had been poisoned by people I trusted, people who wore the same uniform I am wearing right now. A chemical agent stopped my heart. I was dead, not dying, dead. No pulse, no rhythm, no life. He paused, let the silence settle. The only person in that hallway was the woman sitting in this chair. She had no equipment, no team, no support. She had been left alone with a dead man by design, because the people who poisoned me had made sure no help could reach me in time. And in that moment, this woman, this nurse, made a decision that every textbook and every guideline and every protocol you have ever written says was wrong. He looked directly at Captain Reeves. She punched me in the chest. She fractured my sternum. She caused me significant pain that I still feel every time I take a deep breath. And she saved my life. The room was silent. If she had followed protocol, the Admiral continued, I would be buried at Arlington National Cemetery right now, next to my wife. My daughter would be alone. The $11 billion fraud inside the Navy would still be operating. 3 other military officers whose careers and lives were destroyed by this conspiracy would still have no justice. And the people who poisoned me would still be free. He turned to Rachel. Their eyes met. And in that moment, between the battered old Admiral and the exhausted nurse, something passed that neither of them would ever be able to put into words. Recognition. Respect. The bond between 2 people who had faced the worst and had not looked away. Rules are written for stability, the Admiral said, turning back to the board. They are essential. They protect patients. They guide practitioners. I do not dispute their value, but rules assume a functioning system. They assume good faith. They assume that the people around you are trying to help, not trying to kill. When those assumptions fail, when the system itself becomes the threat, then the only thing standing between a patient and death is the judgment, the courage, and the conscience of the person in the room. Nurse Morgan had all 3, and I am alive because of it. He stepped back. He did not sit down. He stood at attention beside Rachel's chair, 4 stars and 48 years of service, standing as a witness for a nurse who had risked everything. The board deliberated for 47 minutes. When they returned, Captain Reeves read the finding. After careful review of the clinical circumstances, witness testimony, and the extraordinary context in which the procedure was performed, this board finds that Nurse Rachel Morgan acted within the bounds of reasonable clinical judgment given the complete absence of standard resources. Her nursing license is reinstated without restriction. Her record is cleared of all clinical findings related to this incident. This review is closed. Rachel did not move. She sat in her chair and stared straight ahead and let the words wash over her like warm water. Cleared. Reinstated. Over. Olivia was crying behind her. The Admiral was still standing at attention. Captain Reeves was gathering his papers. The board members were filing out. Rachel stood up slowly. She turned to the Admiral. "Thank you," she said. "Do not thank me. Thank your fist." She laughed. It hurt her chest in a good way. 3 months later, Rachel Morgan walked through the Pentagon, not in scrubs, not in handcuffs, in a Navy dress uniform with a new set of credentials hanging from her neck. Director of Naval Medical Oversight, a position created specifically in the wake of the Leviathan scandal to ensure that no military medical facility could ever again be compromised from within. Independent authority, direct reporting to the Secretary of the Navy, full access to every military hospital, clinic, and medical unit in the country. Rachel had tried to say no. She had told Olivia it was too much. She had told the Admiral she was just a nurse. He had looked at her the way he looked at her in that hearing room and said, "You were never just a nurse, and the Navy needs people who cannot be bought." So she took the job. The corrupt weapons program was dismantled completely. 12 individuals were indicted. Rear Admiral Vincent Cross received a sentence of 22 years. Gerald Hatch received 18. Sandra Liu received 15. Margaret Caldwell Webb pleaded guilty and received 12, a sentence that the Admiral accepted with the quiet devastation of a man who had lost something that no courtroom could return. Dr. Alan Moreno received 20 years. His medical license was permanently revoked. At his sentencing, Rachel sat in the gallery and watched the judge read the charges. She felt nothing, not satisfaction, not anger, just the hollow weight of a trust that could never be repaired. Agent Daniel Brooks received 14 years in exchange for his cooperation. He would be eligible for parole in 9. Rachel did not attend his sentencing. She had already given him more of her time than he deserved. Captain Thomas Rivera's death was reclassified from accident to homicide. His wife and daughters received a full military death benefit and a personal letter from the Secretary of Defense. Rachel never met them, but she kept Rivera's photograph on her desk, next to her nursing badge, in a small glass frame containing 2 words. "Stay with me." The words she had said to the Admiral on the hallway floor. The words that had become her compass through every dark moment that followed. Rachel still worked 1 shift a week at a veterans clinic in Bethesda. Every Tuesday evening, 6 p.m. to midnight, she checked blood pressures and changed bandages and sat with old soldiers who could not sleep and needed someone to listen. The staff at the clinic did not call her Director Morgan. They called her Rachel. She preferred it that way. One Tuesday night, 3 months into her new role, a young nurse approached her during a quiet moment. 24 years old, fresh out of nursing school, wide-eyed and nervous. "Nurse Morgan, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "I watched the footage, the hallway footage, from that morning. I have watched it probably 50 times, and I keep thinking, what if that had been me? What if I had been standing there with no equipment and a patient dying in front of me? Would I have done what you did?" Rachel looked at her, saw herself 14 years ago, young, uncertain, desperate to do the right thing but terrified of doing the wrong one. "You are asking the wrong question," Rachel said. "What is the right one?" "The right question is not whether you would do it. The right question is whether you would forgive yourself if you did not." The young nurse thought about that for a long time. Then she nodded and went back to work. Rachel watched her go. She thought about hallways and heartbeats and the distance between protocol and survival. She thought about a 4-star admiral eating a banana because a nurse told him to. She thought about a lab technician who hid a vial behind a shelf because his conscience was louder than his fear. She thought about a daughter who drove through the night with a dead woman's money trail in her briefcase and a death threat on her phone. She thought about all the small acts of courage that had added up to something the conspirators never anticipated. Not a single hero, not a single moment. A chain, person by person, choice by choice, each one refusing to look away. The world remembered the punch. The footage had been viewed over 400 million times. It had become a symbol, debated on television, analyzed in medical journals, referenced in congressional hearings. People called it violent. People called it heroic. People called it reckless. Rachel did not call it anything. She remembered the sound it made, the dull, heavy impact of her fist against bone. She remembered the silence afterward, that terrible half-second when nothing happened and she thought she had failed. And then she remembered the heartbeat. One beat, weak, stubborn, alive. That was what mattered. Not the punch, not the footage, not the headlines or the hearings or the title on her office door. The heartbeat. Because in the end, saving a life does not always look gentle. Sometimes it looks like a fist. Sometimes it looks like a woman standing alone in an empty hallway, choosing to act when every rule says wait. Sometimes it looks like violence to everyone watching from the outside. But to the person whose heart starts beating again, it looks like the only thing that matters. It looks like someone who refused to let them die.